wild, wacky, and worrisome reign of King Henry VIII. Once upon a time in the merry kingdom of England, there lived a king who made headlines not just for his regal might, but for his remarkable approach to marriage. This man was King Henry VIII, and his reign was, to put it mildly, a royal soap opera. Henry's life story reads like a bizarre cross between a Renaissance reality show and an ill-fated dating app, with some war and religious upheaval thrown in for good measure. In his youth, Henry VIII was the medieval heartthrob of Europe, tall, athletic, and surprisingly good at playing instruments, basically the Tudor equivalent of a boy band star. Women swooned, knights envied him, and his wardrobe was impressive enough to give modern fashion influencers a run for their money. But it wasn't all sunshine and jousting tournaments. Henry was destined for a throne, and with that throne came responsibility, stress, and of course, wives. Lots of them. As the second son, Henry was originally supposed to live a quieter life. But his older brother Arthur inconveniently died young, thrusting Henry into the role of heir and the start of his marry then divorce journey. Henry VIII is perhaps best known for his 6 marriages. If you think modern relationship drama is messy, you haven't heard the half of it. The king's love life was like a Renaissance Tinder profile gone rogue. Swipe left, swipe right, swipe off with her head. Here's a rundown of the famous wives, summed up in handy mnemonic fashion. Divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. Catherine of Aragon, wife number 1, the classic starter marriage. Henry married her after she was widowed by his late brother because, well, recycling was practical. But when she failed to produce a male heir, Henry decided to break up. Problem was, the Pope wasn't on board with divorce, so Henry created his own Church of England just to dump her. Commitment issues, anyone? Anne Boleyn. The second wife, the it girl of Tudor court. Anne was smart, ambitious, and refused to be just another mistress. She demanded marriage, and Henry, enchanted, agreed. They had a daughter, the future Queen Elizabeth II, but Anne failed to deliver the all-important male heir. That was apparently enough to have her charged with treason, though Henry's wandering eye might have played a part. Her exit, beheading, talk about ghosting. Jane Seymour. Wife number 3 is usually considered the favorite because she gave Henry his precious male heir, Edward VI. Unfortunately, she died shortly after childbirth. Henry mourned her deeply, or at least for as long as it took him to start swiping through European princess profiles again. Anne of Cleves. Think of this marriage as a 16th century version of being catfished. Henry saw Anne's portrait and thought, she looks great. But when she arrived in person, he was less impressed, calling her a Flanders mare. Ouch. They annulled the marriage but stayed friends, making Anne perhaps the savviest of his wives. She got to keep her head and a hefty divorce settlement. Catherine Howard. The 5th wife was young, lively, and, as it turns out, a little too lively for Henry's taste. She was accused of infidelity and lost her head for it, much like her cousin, Anne Boleyn. Henry's midlife crisis was apparently lethal. Catherine Parr. Finally, wife number 6, the survivor. Catherine Parr was smart enough to outlast Henry, mostly by reading up on the fine art of keeping your neck attached to your shoulders. She nursed him through his final years and managed to stay alive through the process. A true Tudor triumph. Henry wasn't just obsessed with matrimony, though. He fancied himself a Renaissance man, skilled in music, sports, theology, and apparently breaking with the Catholic Church. This led to the small matter of the English Reformation, where Henry dissolved the monasteries and confiscated church land to fund his endless wars and palace renovations. The Pope may have excommunicated him, but Henry just shrugged it off, said, "New church, who dis?" and went on his merry way. He also had a slight temper. If you crossed him, or if he suspected you were thinking about crossing him, your head could quickly become a detachable accessory. Sir Thomas More, Cardinal Wolsey, and a whole host of other once loyal friends learned this the hard way. Henry's court was like a Game of Thrones audition reel, and no one was safe from elimination. As Henry aged, his once handsome frame expanded in every direction. By the time he hit his 50s, he was more couch potato than athletic king, and his legs were plagued by ulcers. He'd become a sort of medieval Jabba the Hutt, commanding respect and fear but increasingly isolated and immobile. His fiery temper hadn't cooled, though, and he continued to throw his weight around, literally and figuratively, until his death in 1547. Despite his larger-than-life appetites, Henry VIII left a lasting impact on England. His legacy includes not only his famous children, Mary the First, Elizabeth the First, and Edward VI, but also his transformation of the monarchy and the church. And of course, let's not forget the moral of the story for future kings. When in doubt, maybe just stick with one wife. In the end, Henry VIII might not have been the king England wanted, but he was definitely the king it never forgot.
Thank you for listening to History Videos 101. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us for more fascinating content.